Good day, everyone. Today, we will be talking about Chapter 1, which is about communication process, principles, and ethics. I will be your course instructor for the rest of the semester, and I hope everyone will get a good grasp of what communication is. Let us first define what communication is. As the definition says, the word communication comes from the word commun, which implies something in common, and occasion, which suggests understanding. So, class, when we talk about communication, it means a common understanding of something. When two people, two parties, hold the same interest, a common understanding of a certain value, of a certain idea, then you are able to communicate properly. Okay? Or whether you just agree with a simple idea. Now, there are also other definitions that we can follow, such as communication is the simultaneous sharing and creating of meaning through human symbolic interaction, a systematic process in which individuals interact with and through symbols to create and interpret meanings, and the process of creating and sharing meaning by using verbal and nonverbal symbols in varied contexts. We all now believe that communication really involves all the messages that run in our mind, right? And so, we now discuss the three major components of communication: your verbal messages, your nonverbal messages, and finally, your paraverbal messages. What are they all about? Let's first refer to this situation. That on a daily basis, we work with people who have different opinions, values, beliefs, and needs than our own. In such the case, our ability to exchange ideas with others, understand others' perspectives, and solve problems can always be greatly improved. This is inevitable, class, because as people coming from different personalities, different cultures, and different experiences, you will always differ in the perspectives and the ideas that you always have. It's not likely that you can really find a person with the same values and beliefs as you are, but to be more specific, you are similar, right? Not really entirely the same, which is why, again, that is how communication gives thrill in talking with each other. You might be having the same kind, but apparently you will realize you're just similar, okay? But then again, you all believe in that common understanding you have, the essence of communication. The first one, which is the verbal component, refers to the content of our message, the choice and arrangement of our words. When we talk with other people, isn't it that we tend to choose the right words that we will have? It's very different when you communicate with your friends as compared to communicating with your teachers. One may be so casual and one may be formal, right? That is the verbal component. The second component, which is your nonverbal component, refers to the message we send through our body language. Isn't it again that when we communicate, we tend to move our bodies? Even just the slightest gestures that we have with our hands, even the slightest eye contact that we create with our fellow person that we communicate with, we can observe that we are moving, right? And finally, the paraverbal component refers to how we say what we say, the tone, the pacing, and volume of our voices. We control how we say things. We want to express that we're angry, we can express that using the tone that we have, besides using the words that we speak. Or we can even have a happy tone, right? Depending again on the feeling and the message that you want to convey throughout the rest of the communication process. Now, in short, class, your verbal messages are the words that we choose. Your paraverbal messages would refer to how we say the words, and your nonverbal messages refer now to our body language. Okay? Now, when and where exactly do we use these components? So simple as this, these components are used to send clear, concise messages, and of course, when you're sending, you also receive and correctly understand messages sent to us. Okay? These again are the three components. Now, as taken from Chip Rose, an attorney and mediator, he said, we all use language to communicate, to express ourselves, to get our ideas across, and to connect with the person to whom we are speaking. When a relationship is working, the act of communicating seems to flow relatively and effortlessly. But when a relationship is deteriorating, the act of communicating can be as frustrating as climbing a hill of sand. The essence, again, of this quotation tells us that when you really want to build a relationship, to sustain a relationship, and to maintain a relationship, you have to use communication. It's the only way for you to communicate things, to be honest in everything. Now, let us now look on the 8 parts of the process of communication. We have the following 8 parts, and we will be discussing them one by one. Let's first go with the first one. And it's the source. The source is you, the sender of the message. And to be a good sender, you have to know exactly what information you want to communicate, why you have chosen that particular information, and what result you expect from that message. In short, you're the knowledge giver and the knowledge bearer. You know exactly what you want and what comes into your head. And whatever message you have or whatever idea refers now to the second part, which is your message as the information you want to convey, because without it, you have no reason for communicating, right? And isn't it that again, even if we are trying to establish a connection or even just a conversation with a stranger, we also think of a very specific message that we want to open up, right? The details of the information should be very clear to you before you communicate it. Okay? If you really want to become a good communicator, you have to know the intention as to why you are communicating. Okay? The third one, since you now want to translate your message into reality, this is now the process of encoding, as the process of converting your idea or thoughts of the information into verbal and non-verbal symbols that can be understood by the receiver of the message. And your symbols must be in the language that is not foreign to the receiver, whether you're using English or even sign language, as long as the person who is receiving your message can understand what you're saying. Always consider those facts. And number four, where exactly now do we send this? This is now your channel, the manner in which your message or information is conveyed. It may be done through face to face conversation, a telephone call, a video conference, or even written communication, depending on the means that are available to you or whatever means that you would like to employ. Okay? Number five, which is now decoding, the receiver's mental processing of your message into the meaning suggested by the verbal and or nonverbal symbols you use as a sender. And to be able to do this, he needs to get an accurate picture of the message. So as you are listening to a message, you also need to be wary of what is being said, okay? Rather than just hearing, you should listen. There is a big difference between the two. And we have for number six, the receiver. the person or group of people who will get your message, as basic as this. Your receiver, it's time now for the receiver to communicate back, what we call as the feedback. Feedback again is the receiver's response to your message. And if you get your desired result, the communication is successful. And otherwise, the communication fails. And when this happens, you have to find out why it is unsuccessful, learn from your mistakes, and strive to do better next time. Although on certain times, feedback is often underrated because other people say that even choosing not to communicate is already a feedback, right? Choosing not to reply to a certain message gives you an idea already of what the other person may mean, okay? And you have guesses already or interpretations of that move. That is again feedback. And of course, we have number eight, which is context. This refers to the situation in which the communication takes place, wherein it includes the environment, the location, time of the day, and the temperature, the relationship between the communicators, the cultural backgrounds, and of course, your topic. Everything is considered in context, especially if you want to maintain a proper way of communication, proper way of delivering the messages and receiving them at the same time. Read these are the parts of the communication process, and this is basically how it happens almost every day, starting with the source, ending with the feedback, while everything is surrounded with context. Okay? Now, there are also the five elements of communication to make it much shorter, since there are other experts who would say that this could be a much shorter version. However, if we refer to the previous slides, they are much more specific considering the entire situation. But for this, we may also call the five elements of communication, which is the sender, the message, the channel, receiver, and the effect. The effect of what you have communicated, the desired result of the communication is, or the process. Okay? Now, I want to discuss to you the key principles of communication. The first one, interpersonal communication is inescapable. That it is not possible for anyone not to communicate. Even one's poker face, as you listen to somebody, means a lot, right? Again, just like what I told you earlier, choosing not to communicate is even a form of communication, a form of feedback. It just happens. Okay? There is really that part in you that you really want to express what you feel. Okay? Maybe not intentional, but it's really part of you. That is one key principle of communication. The second one, interpersonal communication is irreversible. I'd like to emphasize this as taken from a Russian proverb says, once a word goes out of your mouth, you can never swallow it again. With the words that we deliver, sometimes we are unaware of the effect that it may have. Thus, it says here, we need to be careful. Yes, whatever we say is already irreversible, even if some other people would say, I did not mean it. But the damage has been done. Okay? We cannot remove the fact that we might have hurt a person. That is interpersonal communication. We cannot take back what was already given. The third principle, interpersonal communication is complicated. Whenever you communicate with anyone, you simultaneously interpret both his verbal and nonverbal language. And that is often both confounding and demanding at the same time. Because why on earth do we really need to consider everything that takes place? Everything that the person or the other person is giving. But the truth is, if we really want to understand the person, of what he really feels at the moment, we don't just refer to what is being said, but we also refer to the situation that is happening. His body language may also talk about something. Whether that person is telling you that he's happy, but on your body language is much different. Okay? That is again your interpersonal communication as complicated. Now, what makes communication even more complicated? When we're communicating, we're actually communicating with at least six people in our mind. The person whom you think you are, the person whom you think the other person is, the other person whom you think the other person thinks you are, the person whom you think the other person thinks he is, the person whom the other person thinks you think you are, and the person whom the other person thinks you think he is. If you analyze this carefully, this is referring to the perceptions that we have with one another. Your perceptions of yourself, your perception of the other person, and your perceptions with one another. That is how communication actually happens. Okay? This might be a subconscious aspect of our communication, but this is present. Okay? Number four, we have the interpersonal communication is contextual, whereas communication is affected by several factors. One, we have the psychological contexts, your desire, values, beliefs, and personality. Everything that is happening inside of you, again, can be referred as a psychological context. Your relational contexts would be your reactions to other person based on your relationships. Could be your boss, your colleague, your friend, or sibling, right? Which is why the tone of our voice will always depend on the person that we are talking with. We are much comfortable with the person because he is your friend. It might be your colleague, right, which you have known for so long. Again, you could make it casual, but there are also situations that you have to make it formal. That again is interpersonal communication. Letter C, you have the situational context, wherein it deals with the psychosocial where you are communicating. An interaction that takes place in a classroom, which is quite formal, will be very different from one that takes place in a bar, which is very informal. Again, it depends on where you are as the situation implies. Okay? And we have letter D, the environmental context, wherein it refers to the physical where you are communicating. Objects in the room and their arrangement, location, noise level, the temperature and the season, and even the time of the day may be able to affect your way of communication. You might be an eloquent speaker, but nobody can get away from the heat of the sun, which might affect the way you are communicating. Whether you're sweating or not, again, it really affects because you're not so comfortable in the environment that you are in. Okay? So that is your environmental context. You also have your cultural context. Of course, it includes all the learned behaviors and rules that affect the interaction. Your bodily movement, your facial expression, your gesture, the distance, and even the eye contact vary in different cultures, right? There are other cultures that will tell you not to do eye contact, especially if you're communicating because it might mean something in their culture. But at least again, we know, right? So we can understand further a person by delving deeper into his or her own culture, by knowing why exactly does this person communicate in this way. There might be a reason which can be taken in or her culture. That is cultural context class. Now, to end my presentation for now, I'd like now everyone to refer to these sentences. Once you have uttered something, you can never take it back. and its effects remain. Anyone who says that apologies can heal the hurt caused by offensive remarks is lying. With these sentences, I would like you now to answer this on a word file. Okay? So after this, or after watching this, you may now start doing your assignment, which is also to be passed within the day. I will be waiting for your works until 9 p.m. within the day so that you may be able to submit it right away. Okay? So the format will be indicated in the portal, which can be seen after this video. Okay? I hope you have enjoyed the first part of our introduction, and I hope you have learned something out of the basics of communication. And I hope to see you all on face to face and even on synchronously. Goodbye, everyone.